Film God, familia, señoras, señores, welcome to all of you wonderful human beings. For any first-time listeners, my name is Isusko, and I am the host of this, I'd say, wonderful, magnificent podcast because I do enjoy it and I love it. But welcome, and we are a podcast that talks to and documents the film family of this generation so that the next and future generations can hear how we did it. And I'm an 80s baby, born in the 80s. You know, we went from tape to CD to MP3s. I'm sure with everything that's happening in the world at the minute with the technology, will be the old guard of going, when I started, everything was shot on 35mm. Unless you were a promo, I mean you had 16 or 8. And be boring all the youth that are creating things in VR, AI, augmented reality worlds. But I know that is the white elephant in the room of what AI is doing, where we're going, what's it done, what's it going to do. And look, we don't have a crystal ball. And I'm sure there's going to be plenty of episodes where we'll talk about it. But today we're going to be talking about and experiencing someone's story who made it happen for themselves. Started off where he started and now has worked his way through myriad scenarios, situations, taken opportunities. It was just a beautiful episode to record. And I'm really looking forward to hearing it. I guess some film news summary just before we start getting into the full episode. From what I can quickly digest the last couple of days, the Paramount, Netflix, Warner takeover keeps rumbling forward. They were given until the end of play Monday, which was yesterday, Monday 23rd of Feb, to get all best and final offers on the table. Netflix coming in at around the 84 billion US dollars, and Paramount, I believe, coming in at just over 104 billion, which sounds crazy just saying it, you know, that amount of money. Just 104 billion, yeah, take it, yeah, no, we'll go for it. And I think summarized for me, the Paramount deal is a take all, more money, thank you very much, which for I'm sure the shareholders probably looks like a better prospect. From a crew perspective, the likelihood is that there'll be mergers across Skydance, Paramount and Warner Brothers, which could, I guess in theory, potentially lead to job losses, but who knows? They might keep it going, they might expand, which is the narrative of Netflix CEO saying that they just want to grow. So they're not looking to cut back, they're looking to expand, and they would take on the Warner Brothers studio and their streaming services, and then have the bits of the company that they don't necessarily want or need as a separate independent entity. So we'll see whether money trumps. I don't want to say that name because he came into the equation and started having his little two-piece. But we'll see where it goes. I mean, it is a business, and if you're a shareholder and you don't particularly care about the people in the companies, you'll take the more money. If you have a slightly empathetic attitude to business and you want to see growth, then you might go with a Netflix. I don't know. Let me know in the comments, which one would you choose? And then last little roundup, we've had the BAFTAs recently, which had its own controversy. So they start the ceremony then they release and start the broadcast 2 hours later, so that it gives them a chance to edit it down to something that they deem is at a length that viewers will watch. And they missed a racial slur that was said by one of the audience members who suffers from Tourette's, who was ticking, and they didn't edit or mute that word, but they did take out part of acceptance speeches, one where the person said "Free Palestine," took that out. One where they someone was describing some of the themes from Zootropolis 2, which, corruption, inequalities and persecution of race, to the now what is happening in the United States of America. So that was taken out, and there was a lot of discussion as to how they handled it, and they didn't apologize immediately, went to a global audience with that word being broadcast. They said they didn't hear it, which I'm sure they didn't, if they sent it out and put it on iPlayer. But there's thoughts now that, should it just be live? Just live. And look, we're all adults. If someone does swear, if it does go over too long, or it does, have a knock-on effect for everything else, then so be it. It's a live event. You want it to feel live. The audience want to connect to it in real time. And again, ties in nicely with the episode, because the Oscars, I think from 2029, are going to just be streaming on YouTube. So the market is changing. Audiences, the way that audiences engage with entertainment and live events is changing, and we need to change with it, learn about it, and be on the right side of what is happening and what changes will come, because we're the generation that's going to make those changes happen. So, as always, you wonderful human beings, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful time hearing our guest's story. Let's get to the app.
Ladies and gentlemen.
So, Film Gods, welcome back to another episode. Welcome back to 2026. It seems to just be flying past. And today we've got a man who I've never worked with and I've never met, but he's a very articulate man from the articles that I've read. And I've read a few of them earlier this year, and I knew that I had to get him on. And in subsequent chats, I know that this episode is going to be such an amazing hour of your time to just hear of how we've gone, what we're doing, and how we can maybe best be suited for the years to that are coming ahead. And I just want to thank our guest for coming on, because it's half term. He's a busy man with lots to do. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your time. What is your name, so that the first questions we'll just get out there so we can get into it is, what's your name and what is your role on the call sheet?
My name is Jon Sen, and these days my role on the call sheet is executive producer.
Amazing. Now, did you just come out of film school and go straight into exec producing, or did you start really somewhere else?
Yeah. That's how it happened. Straight away, kind of like walk in, top job. No, not quite that simple. I started off years ago now. It's about 30 years, I think. And I had always wanted to get into film. I loved film as a kid, and I'd watched loads, and I wanted to always direct. And so I went to university because my very strict parents were like, get a good degree first before you go into that dangerous creative sector. And so I obeyed them, and off I went, got a good degree, but then did a film course afterwards.
Amazing.
Arrived in London. Here I am.
Give me work, guys. I'm
Yeah.
gonna.
Just here. I'm the person you've been waiting for. Here, and
Finally.
everybody was like, "Who the fuck are you?" Um,
Just
and
riding in on a donkey like Jesus at Easter. Thank you, guys. I'm here to take over
yeah,
the creative industry.
yeah,
The savior
exactly.
has arrived.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody was like, "Yeah, we don't need anybody else in the industry." And I'd come down from Huddersfield, the north, so had I had very little and a massive rent to pay, and so I
Mm.
scrabbled around for the first job I could get, and that was at a post-production house, now defunct post-production house in Camden,
Mm.
which was called Chrysalis, which became Chrysalis Todd AO, as a runner on the princely sum of £7 grand a year.
Wow.
And even when the wonderful post-production woman who hired me, when she told me it was £7 grand, even she was slightly embarrassed about you, and she kind of apologized. And I mean, that's what we all start out at. It's good. Anyway, I started there, which was a real come down to earth. I mean, amusing in retrospect, but I'd kind of like done 3 years at Trinity College, Cambridge, and I had a kind of political philosophy degree, and suddenly I was cleaning toilets and making coffee for people, and it was like a real kind of
Wow.
um,
Yeah.
so can I swear? I'm not sure if
Of
I can
course you
swear.
can.
So
I'll
go.
start. Oh shit, fuck, fuck, shit, fuck. There you go. All
Okay,
yours.
good. Um, but it was just at the beginning of offline Avid
Yep.
kind of editing. So in those days, the edit suites were massive. They were big, like the bridge of the Starship Enterprise. They were huge
Mm.
consoles. I don't know if you remember, tape to tape. And I was really fascinated by editing. And at night, I used to stay behind and teach myself how to Avid edit, because in those days it was a new thing, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, look what it can do."
Mm.
And I taught myself how to Avid edit, and very quickly with those skills, I edited some of my own footage. Then I was able to kind of get that cut footage, seeing it was like a small, a kind of pop, I say pop video, but it was nothing more than a tourist video cut to Lenny Kravitz. But somebody saw it and kind of like thought, oh, there's something in his, and so I managed to get a job at 2020 very quickly, then became an editor of documentaries. I say very quickly, I mean 3 or 4 years. I
Mm.
worked on a brilliant show called What's the Story, which was a magazine show. Then went on to do The Real and all those Channel 4 big kind of Channel 4 documentaries,
As an
which was
editor, or were
great.
you also kind of directing and
As,
shooting it?
no, as an editor. So even then, and I think we should talk about this actually, about like why I've kind of hopped around various
Mm.
um, careers and different jobs. I got into it, got to a ladder editor, worked my way up as a freelance editor. That was great, and I loved the edit was is always great because you are really close to the kind of the main decision making. You're
Yes.
in there with seeing the rushes coming in. You're able to craft the story. You are kind of like you're not stuck miles away on a set and then kind of not knowing what's going. You're really close to kind of like all the main decisions. It was brilliant. You can have a massive impact, and um, I mean, when it goes wrong. Kind of like actually, kind of like you're still a second in command really at that
Mm.
stage. You're kind of like so it's you learn an awful amount, and it was brilliant. But of course, rushes come in, and you start thinking after a while, oh, I could do better than this. I mean, why have they put the camera there? It's ridiculous. Why? The better shot was over there. I want to
Yeah.
do my own. I'm going to cut somebody else's bad rushes together. I want to cut my own bad rushes together. Do you know what I mean? And so, and so then I kind of can't be that difficult. And then, of course, I wrote and directed I wrote a short film, managed to get some money for it at the Edinburgh Film Festival, got onto set, shot my own film and suddenly understood why, how hard it was to get decent rushes. It was just like, this is a disaster, kind of like, what's the, it was so much hard. Once I mean, in the safety and sanctity of an edit suite, you can get, you can think everybody's in kind of like, why, what's going on? And then you're out there and then you go, oh, that's why they put the camera there, because kind of like there's a massive truck over there and you can't,
Yeah.
just, so
But I guess
that was
that
a
from
real,
an edit perspective, and I thought when I first started, I wanted to be a director, and someone said, right, you've got to go and learn how to edit because then
yeah,
you know what shots you need and how how you can shoot around a scene.
yeah,
But as an editor, without any emotion to the rushes, so I'm sure as a director, when you're shooting it, you go, I have to use this shot because it took us 2 hours to climb up that hill
yeah,
and we just got it and it was the last take and we all felt amazing, but then you get in the edit and you go, oh fuck, it doesn't work. As
no,
an editor, there's none of that emotion to the shots. You're just like, what actually makes sense? But that,
yeah.
I'm sure as a director, you've kind of maybe partly got an editor's brain, and when you're going, all I need is that close up, a cutaway of there, and this scene, I'm done. I'm happy.
It's great from that perspective. When you're up against it and it is 6 o'clock and the light's falling and you've got an hour and everybody's a bit grumpy because there's no overtime and you just go, look, I've got two shots and it's that and that and I can cover the scene in that.
Yeah.
And as long as and I mean I talk about this often with directors I work with about knowing what a shot for me is and I talk about this a lot, is a unit of emotion, not action. By which I mean, if you know what emotional beats you've got to hit in a scene, actually, you can normally play it on one or two shots. I mean, I always like three because as an editor, you want a third thing to make the other two to put the other two into relief. So kind of I try and do three, but if you can actually if you know what emotion and story you're delivering in a scene, you can get away with one shot. So
Mm.
it's a really it's a great tool to have, and also from editing, particularly the magazine shows that I used to edit, where we used to get. I mean, it was a live show on Channel 5, and it went out every Sunday, and the equipment we were using was terrible, and the directors were we were all about in our late 20s, you can imagine, and so the stuff that used to come in was. Sometimes it was kind of cobbled together and grab. So you'd end up doing montages to tiny bits of grabs, like a second here. Oh, look, on the end of that take, after they've shouted cut, there's like a little bit we can use that move to kind of cut to something else, and you suddenly
Mm.
become really everything has a purpose, and you can use the tiniest bits to kind of give you a sense of tone or shift the mood, and so you become very, very there's a lot of dexterity once you know how the edit works.
Mm.
Um, but then, I wrote directed this short. It was actually a half hour, which, it's all right for a first short film, but, ain't gonna set the world on fire. And, but it
A
kind
lot
of
of lessons
taught,
learned.
yeah, a lot of lessons learnt, a lot of lessons about how to delegate. I think I got
Mm.
into real not trouble, but like I made a lot of errors and just not trusting the team, wanting to try and do it all kind of like because I come from editing and I went and actually it's a real lesson in trusting your team. And then I got an amazing break from a wonderful producer called Catherine Waring, who sadly deceased now, but she was a brilliant force of nature, and she'd seen a couple of shorts I'd made, and I got this phone call. I remember kind of being very coming home. I was shooting a low budget short for no money, and I was going, I'm 28, and Spielberg was making Jaws at 28, and I'm on a training up show, and kind of like, what's going on? And I got this phone call out of the blue from Catherine, and she said, I'm doing a project called Second Generation. It's written by Neil Biswas, and I was like, I know Neil, and who I'd heard of Neil, never met him. He's a brilliant kind of writer, and it's a two 90s set between Brick Lane and Calcutta, And we've got Ampuri, who was sadly also kind of like now gone, amazing Bollywood actor and somebody who was in a lot of films you'd recognise and know of. And we've got Ampuri, and he's signed, and Nitin Sawhney's doing the soundtrack. And I was like, is this a joke? Kind of like, it was like really. And we're talking to Sean Bobbitt, maybe. I don't know if you'd be happy about him DOPing, and kind of like, I was like, what? And so suddenly
Yeah,
I
I've
found
already got the
myself.
job. It sounds like you're not even asking me. You're just telling me. It's amazing.
It was, and I was like, this, it was an amazing story about second
Mm.
generation British Asians set between Brick Lane. It was Parminder Nagra, just after Bend It Like Beckham. And it was set between here and Calcutta, and it was Neil. It was kind of Neil's love letter to that period of time as well. And it was an amazing, it was 290s, went out on Channel 4, got a lot of acclaim. And then, but then, as ever, when you have a big hit, often you then kind of like, you expect suddenly everything to take off.
Mm.
And it didn't quite take off and, in the way that I expected. So I kind of then was directing more and more.
Do you get an
Started,
agent at some point to then be kind of getting you scripts, or could there
yeah,
is there a way there that, because I guess that momentum is so important. It's so important. You kind of come off the back of something like that. It's like you hear directors that have just won awards at Cannes and stuff, and
yeah.
you've got to have that next one coming. Where did you feel like you were going then from that point? You'd just done those 290s, but you're saying it didn't really feel like it was the momentum. It didn't sound
Yes.
like the momentum was there.
I think I made two errors. One was I let my ego get away with myself. So like
Mm.
so I was like, I've just done 290s on Channel 4, kind of like, and I was doing meetings with Miramax, and they were going, "Oh, this is great. We'll send you the next feature." I mean, Americans, it transpires, do that a lot. You always come out of a meeting with Americans going, "Oh my God, they love me," and then there's always kind of silence. It's a real kind of like, but nobody told me that at the time.
Yeah.
Even now, that happens a lot with the US. You kind of come
Mm.
out going, "It's a done deal,"
Yeah.
um, and so I was expecting this next big thing, and also I took some bad advice and kind of like and didn't do things that I think were could have been brilliant and use that momentum.
Mm.
So
That's really
stalled a bit.
honest. Yeah, no, that's really honest, because I think some people would have just blamed the situation. But actually, the first thing that you said was, I let my ego get in the way. And you kind of go, actually, from where you've come from, that 7 grand a year, making teas and all the rest of it, all of a sudden you're here.
Yeah,
And the ego can play a real naughty part in trying to make you think that actually that was never you, and this
yeah.
is who you are. But actually you're all of it. You are the, at any stage you're the toilet cleaner and the tea maker and the assistant editor and the director and and I think that's a really honest answer, so thank you. That's
So
Yeah,
I think
appreciate that.
I do see that. You see it a lot. You see it a lot of, I think, with you see it a lot with creative talent who are very good but just need a lot of training. I mean, I by the time I got second generation, my brand or my reputation or whatever it was kind of like I was, there was a lot of heat, as they say, to use terms that I loathe, but there's a lot of heat around me. But 5 years later, when there was very little heat, but I'd kind of learnt my craft on other things like Waterloo Road, this first series of Waterloo Road or Casualty. I was a
Mm,
really good director, but all the heat had gone away. So it
mm,
was this kind of really kind so it's a real you've got to balance what you hope and what you feel and keep a check on your ego whilst knowing where you sit craft wise. I mean, I was and I wouldn't obviously change anything. I was parachuting into this amazing role directing. I mean, working with Nitin Sawhney was brilliant. Working with Neil Biswas, brilliant. Parminder on. They were just incredible creatives, and what an experience. I just don't think I quite knew how to navigate myself from there, but also the when I really learned to direct was in the period after that. It was kind of like it was the hours I spent on set doing 22 casualties and kind of like, 8 Waterloo Roads, and kind of like when you work with a team who really understand and could help you deliver a vision, and then suddenly kind of like I had one year that was just electric, and I worked with a brilliant DOP and a brilliant camera guy, and the three of us, we just worked constantly for a year on the say on Casualty when it just got to Cardiff, and I kind of owe them so much because the three of us together just then have a shorthand, and we pick up a script and we kind of go kind of like that shot, long lens, Trev, long lens over there, kind of like looking over there, but let something in the foreground, let's put it on a kind of slider, kind of like it was. And Simon Butcher DOP would know, exactly how to light it, and we just shot some amazing stuff, some really wonderful some really wonderful stuff, including a kind of a whole episode of Casualty in one shot. Like, nice. I mean, I know post-adolescence, everybody's like, everybody could do that, but it was in the day when, it was 48 minutes, and it was like, whole one shot. For me. It was a great thing to do.
And
so then
that level of craftsmanship that you would have had in the 290s and Casualty, are you having to? I always hear about I work in short form and I work in commercials, music videos, etc. And the speed on a promo is different to the speed on a commercial. That 90, the Channel 4 compared to live TV, that shorthand must come in quite useful, because the Casualty and EastEnders and all these kind of programs that are, 2-3 episodes, maybe more episodes a week. The speed that you have to work at has to be so high, I'm sure.
Yeah, it does teach you a lot. I mean, the 90s were, I think it was 4 or 5 pages a day, whereas obviously Casualty was, 8, 7 or 8, sometimes higher per day. I think obviously there's different factors at play. Casualties often, I mean, there's a lot of location, but there's obviously there's an amazing set in Cardiff that is got a dance floor, kind of just a beautiful set. So you learn where the best angles are, so you can shoot stuff quicker. You know how to block people a lot with a lot more agility than you can when you turn up to a location and kind of go, okay, so
let's figure it out.
Let's be exactly. Yeah. If you come through that door, I don't want to come in through that door. All that stuff. So, but you have to work very quickly, and that shorthand is really important between creatives. But also, you become a lot more agile in your thinking in terms of you can block. Where the best instinctively where the best shots are. That a scene breaks down into, the emotional beats of a scene and where you're going to pick that up from, and when it just becomes, it becomes a real joy. I mean, that year of my life at Casualty was just a real joy and a real, at the end of it, you feel so able to take on the world. But then, of course, you've done as they used to say, too much continuing drama. So then you kind of like you're locked into doing continuing drama for a long time, because nobody outside continuing drama wants to, it's such it's
an industry that they kind of want to get you in. Yeah.
And it's fueled a lot by snobbery, the industry, and to its own detriment. I mean, kind of slightly less so these days. I mean, particularly with writers, those continuing drama writers who have written hours on EastEnders or Casualty, or you can trust them with delivering a brilliant story, great characters. They understand narrative momentum, everything that you need, and so the days are gone when people are slightly sniffy about writers from soap. I think there's still a little bit of a snobbery about directors from continuing drama, even though um, what those directors do within the time constraints is really remarkable.
Phenomenal.
It's and people will look at an EastEnders and kind of go, oh, it doesn't, it's not lit very well. It's fine. They're shooting 23 pages a day.
Yeah.
So it's like, and the idea that that's down to the director rather than the time constraints is a real error. And I think the industry it trips itself up by not trusting continuing drama directors more. And it's something that we, Esmeralda, which is Esmerlda Productions, is the company that I now run with
Yes.
Lenny. And it's something that we really focus on is looking at those continuing drama writers who just perhaps haven't had that break, and directors when we eventually get to production, they'll be the people that we look to because they are the people that can deliver. And actually, I wrote. I mean, you mentioned the articles. One of the articles I wrote was about how people who don't have inherited privilege uh, often end up in continuing drama just because it pays, and then the kicker is that you just end up being stuck there. So you've taken these jobs because they pay in an industry, but then you can't get out of them. And actually, those creatives really need an outlet because they are some of the best people I know, really creative.
Wow. So I'm piecing a few little I'm putting a few little things together here, which I want to just put out there to see whether I've actually understood. Your what you're doing now with Esmeralda seems to have grown from an understanding and a background of a certain environment where you know the people. You know the writers are great. You know that the actors are great. You know that everything that is done in that world is of a caliber solely for the fact of the time restraints. If you gave, the greatest director of all time 10 minutes to light and shoot and get off a scene, it's not going to
Mm.
look like their best work. And with that understanding, it seems like with Esmeralda, you're kind of creating opportunities for those people to be able to step out, which I think is beautiful because it seems like you're trying to help the you back then. You're going, I was in that position. I knew that. But what was that journey then from that great year of Casualty to where you are now as a exec producer, MD, and where does how does that journey then sit together, and what brought you to want to try and help certain aspects and people of the industry?
So I became locked in continuing drama for the reasons we've just discussed. There's a lot of
Yeah.
snobbery, and even though I was directing some significant episodes of Casualty, including the one shot, I mean it's some of their big iconic episodes or the centerpiece episodes, I could not get outside. I couldn't break out of it at all. And I remember I'd done by then, I think I'd directed about 22 episodes of Casualty and kind of that. And I remember going to Shadow. I applied to Shadow on Silent Witness, and because I just couldn't get anything else. And you'd think BBC, and I remember going to interview to Shadow and Silent Witness and not getting that. And I was just like, what more can I do
Yeah.
at this stage? I'd also, so I'd also then, and we will come to this, I promise. So I'd also started writing because it seemed to me that there was whatever this ceiling was, that I was kind of hitting, this glass ceiling on the directing. I needed to have more strings to my bow just because I just couldn't kind of bang up against the ceiling for the rest of my life. So I'd started doing a bit of writing. I'd been given a really brilliant opportunity by an executive producer at the time at the BBC called Oliver Kent, who really put faith in me to write. And so I've been writing and directing and writing and directing. And then a producer, Lucy Rafferty, brilliant producer, said, "Why don't you write and direct an episode of Casualty?" Which was fantastic.
Amazing.
And so suddenly things started to shift. She then
Did you
gave me a
suddenly
job.
write in the first line? It's like exterior Hollywood We are in
Yeah,
on a Barbados beach near
big drone shot. That's kind of, no, it was really. I mean, it's always a joy when you're writing, directing your own stuff because you can, when you hit problems from production, you can,
Yeah.
I'd written this coach kind of like tumbling down a hill and being kind of like, and actually then they were like, there's no way we could do that. So we've done a kind of like, it was a real joy, and it was a real joy to do. And
Mm.
off the back of that, I started story producing. So
What does that mean?
Lisa Rafferty, the producer of Casualty, had given me this break, rang me up, and she was like, and the story producer on a continuing drama is the person along with the exec who basically comes up with all the stories for all their for the entire series.
Hmm.
And it is the most difficult job in continuing drama by a country mile. It's the story producer on EastEnders has to come up with, I think they do over 200 and I think it's 202 episodes a year.
Wow.
Um, the story producer sits, leads a team of storyliners
Mm.
and researchers, but they have to come up every month with a significant amount of story and you do this on a kind of on just on a cycle. You sit with several writers in what's called a short-term conference, and you pitch for various families. And I think this should happen over the next 3 months or 6 months at the long term. And then you kind of coalesce everybody's ideas and bring your own stamp to it and kind of work out where you are gonna what stories you can tell based on not only stories that are going to be exciting, but which actors are available, because obviously you're shooting up against one another. So sometimes you go,
Mm.
it's a great story, but so and so's on holiday that week, so we can't do that story. So you're like,
Right.
and you're also looking at the budget because you're
Mm.
going, actually, I want a big episode there and there, and your line producer's going, oh, we've only got money for one big moment here. So which episode do you want it to be? You're also kind of looking at when things are going to transmit. So you're going, okay, if I do that big episode there, then actually we can submit it for that round of awards or that or kind of because it's you need kind of critical momentum as well in terms of
Mm.
what episodes are hitting and for the NTAs or about whatever. So you are really what it was an amazing moment for me because it was a little bit Wizard of Oz behind the curtain because I'd been directing individual episodes or a couple of episodes or writing individual episodes, and I suddenly got this job where I suddenly saw that the decisions I could make as a story producer, like if I did this story with these actors here, then that would involve this person. We'd need that person for that length of time. It would transmit there. We could save a bit of the money on the budget there. We wouldn't have to do a big accident over here. And we could take the money from that big. And you're suddenly seeing the whole thing line up. It was like
Wow.
it's a Damascene moment, really. It's such an amazing job. And of course, once you've seen that and you understand, you suddenly see the whole system
Mm.
in a very clear way, which goes from getting the money to make it to kind of getting to where it transmits. You suddenly see the whole journey of post and everything like that. And off the back of that, and doing that for a while,
Any
Lucy
trepidation
said,
going into such a role? Having, having to
yes, a
then
bit.
kind of go, I'm in charge of the story for the next year. Having never done anything of that, I say caliber, but that level of um of consistent of consistent I can't think of the word I'm looking for, but from a day-to-day directing, you can jump in. Here's a script. I've done my prep and blah, blah, but having that
Yeah.
kind of level of consistent pressure every single day, every single week for that length of time. Do you have a
It is a
mentors
real.
and stuff around you, or have you just gone, I've got this, I'm going for it,
No,
and take it my own?
I mean, by then I'd written about 10 episodes of Casualty, so I knew.
Okay.
So I'd
You knew that
I,
process.
I understand the
Yeah.
stories, but what you or I understand storytelling, and I fundamentally it's all about storytelling, isn't it? In directing, writing. So I understand the process of story. What I hadn't quite grasped was how stories needed to be told over, say, 12 episodes.
Yeah.
So, you've got an ABC, you've got a massive board, and it's like A, B, C, D stories, all kind of EastEnders, it's all kind of episodes. And it's all different coloured post-its. Which story is going to hit the A, because your A story's got to film with your E story. You can't have the same people because you're going to film at the same time, so you can't have. And so that's the challenge. It's not just a storytelling challenge, but it's a logistical challenge about like
Yes.
who's available when. So that was the bit I hadn't anticipated. And trepidation, no, because I was ignorant of the challenges that I faced.
Don't know what you
And
don't
just,
know. Yeah, it's
yeah,
amazing.
exactly. And then I went into it and kind of came up with brilliant stories. And the line producer came in and was like, you're not going to have to film these. Do you know what I mean? And I was like, oh, shit. But you learn very quickly, don't you?
Yes, you have to.
But having done that, I went on to Kate Oates is very, very, very brilliant and experienced executive producer, and she worked on Corrie. She hired me to exec on EastEnders, and then I did 3 years there, which was having done the story producing role. It was that role, even though you have a story producer kind of working for you on EastEnders, and that's a great reassurance. That's the mainstay of that job, is making sure that the stories kind of work, and making sure that but on top of that, you've got the budget, and you've got talking to the cast and working with the cast and making sure they're all happy, and and then there's press and publicity, and it's the story producer job plus. Do you know what I mean? It's kind
Yeah.
of like
As
um,
creative, or are you starting to, is there a point that you start to step away from the creative because there's so many other logistical things that, being in meetings about budgets are more, become more often than actually sitting down and running a set or being with the cast or doing that kind of stuff?
I think undeniably there's a lot of that administrative stuff
Hmm.
around it. I say administrative. That's it. I mean, there is kind of cast management and making sure the budget's balanced and the press, and there's all that stuff around it. But fundamentally, if your stories don't work on any show, then you haven't got a show.
Yeah.
So that is and those who've done that EastEnders exec job, they always say the truth of it is you have got to do all the scripts and those stories and the story conferences, and you've got that planned for your working day, very neatly planned out in your
Mm.
diary, and then you arrive at 10 o'clock and something's gone wrong. Do you know what I mean? It's just
Scrap the diary, lose it.
yeah, you spend all the day
Yeah.
sorting that problem and visiting set and going around and sorting out, and then 5 o'clock comes and you've still got your day's reading and all the story stuff to do. So you
Oh,
just do that
wow.
and so, and that was and then of course COVID hit during my tenure there, which was, a massive curveball. I mean, I remain so proud of what we did as a team
Mm.
coping with COVID. I mean, we designed ways of filming with under all those conditions that came with a pandemic. We were the first ones to get back up filming. We created new techniques of filming under 2 meters and social distancing that the industry then followed. You know what I mean? We were kind of like, and that was down to that, amazing EastEnders team who were,
Mm.
yeah, really incredible and creative, and they were, determined, like, because the other soaps, the big soaps, Corrie and Emmerdale, had a lot of episodes in the bank, and so they could not film for a bit longer.
Yes.
Uh, and when they came back, they wanted to film in a social distance manner, whereas we could just see this diminishing number of episodes on our shelf, which we then started going, we'll do 2 a week,
Yeah.
rather than kind of like 4, and so we kind of like halved them, and then we were really And what are we going to do? Do we just kind of stop? Does EastEnders go off air? What do we kind of do? And eventually, of course, it did go off for a small amount of time. But when it
Mm.
came back, all the work we'd done designing new ways of filming and scripts and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it wasn't without a few hiccups because we'd had to abandon lots of story because we'd have to come off air. We had to abandon. We had to start stories again, basically, and kind
Yes.
of like in September. So it was story wise, there was a occasional kind of hiccup, but we were back filming. We did incredible work as a team. I mean, it's a big team that, and everybody
Mm.
was amazing. It remains one of my kind of proudest professional moments. What we're getting back on air and doing what we did.
Amazing. Well, and we were saying we were talking about this offline, but that moment of COVID, there's going to be some industries and there's going to be some people that have just gone, can't go into work. Sorry, guys. I'd love to be there, but yeah, the government. Whereas the film industry, we went, okay, how do we fix this? And it was almost as if it was just treated like another kind of production issue instead of
Yeah,
like a global pandemic. We're like, okay, well, look, these are the rules, these are the parameters, this is what they're saying, this is what we can do, this is how we need to fix it. And it was like everyone just desperately wanted to be seeing their friends and being on set and making new stuff. Um, I just feel like the whole ethos of film crew, the mantra of being a freelance professional is let's get it done. What do we have to do? What are the problems? What are the issues? What do we need to do? Can we do it? Maybe. All right, well, let's give it a go. And if we don't, then we learn. And I think that's what stands us out as an industry.
yeah,
Whereas maybe some other industries just went, yeah, sorry, we got to shut down. That's it. Sorry, see you in a year. And that's what I love about what we do and how we do it, and that passion that you talk about, where you kind of go, look, we didn't want to have to, we didn't want to have to shut down, but we did.
yeah,
But then when we came back, we're at the forefront of rules and regs and how to film and 2 meters and this, that, and the other. And I think
yeah,
that's what makes our industry such a beautiful beacon of hope and light, that we kind of go with whatever's coming in any situation. There's always going to be a pocket of people that just go, how do we fix this? What can we
yeah,
do? How do we move this forward? And I think that's why I love what I do. I love what I
yeah,
do.
yeah,
There's never, every issue is just, it's another chance to test that brain, to get that dark matter fire to going, all right, well, we can't get that shot, but what about if we just step them to the thing a bit and then drop the camera down, and then we can think, and if we come in from this angle and whatever,
yeah,
you go, oh, actually, do you know what, that could work, and then that's it. You
yeah,
go,
yeah,
right, let's
yeah,
give it,
yeah.
let's rehearse it, let's go. Love it.
It's really exciting stuff.
Absolutely love it.
I mean, we love what we do, don't we?
Yes.
And most of the people we know in our industry, love what we do. We
Yeah.
couldn't wait to get back to work, and there's something soul nourishing about telling stories in whatever your role is.
Mm.
There's we were desperate to get back and get back working, and not just for the storytelling, but also for the camaraderie, the amazing kind of teams that you have on a film set. It is it's a really life affirming thing, isn't it? What we do.
Mm.
So
There's
it's
not many,
great.
as I always say to friends, is you go on a job and it might be in my instance, it might just be a kind of 2, 3 day slightly bonkers commercial. But at the end of that day, end of that last day, and as an AD, you get the privilege to be able to say, thank you so much, ladies and gents, that is a wrap. And people are genuinely so happy and proud of what
Mm.
they've achieved, and they're hugging. And it depends on where you're at. Sometimes there's a few high fives, and sometimes, there's this there's this pride in what they've done. We have to give up so much of our lives. We're up
Yeah,
early, we're on set late, our backs are hurting, our feet are hurting. But I don't know if there's many other jobs that we would want to do. Would we want to be on a train at 7 in the morning going into London to sit in an office from 9 to 5 to then go home and do it all again? Yeah, maybe the start of this year, everyone's probably going, take a little 9 to 5. But actually, when we get into it and we're doing we do, there's nothing else we want to do. And that's where I want to jump in quickly about the articles that kind of got me into to touching base and talking, and just what we've been talking about there, which is, COVID and the global pandemic, the ability to see what's happened and then look and project forward. You're kind of the article that you've spoken, and I don't really know much about the money and the finance and that kind of side of life. So it was a real eye-opening experience to kind of understand how the money affects it and that kind of stuff, and then move talking about what's coming, and you touch base on just how we can try and make the most of 26 and understanding the money and keeping your contacts warm and being kind. I'd just love to quickly just touch base on where we're at now and what you think might be kind of coming, and maybe just touch base on some of the touch points in the articles.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I wrote those Substacks was, well, there was loads of stuff I wanted to get off my chest, obviously. But also, there are a lot of people working in our industry, particularly kind of freelancers, who know that they're not working as much, know that there's less drama being made, but don't understand quite why and what's happened. Because, like, post-pandemic, there was like this big boom, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, this is amazing!" And my rates have gone up, and like this is kind of like glory days, and all the whole industry flooded with new indies. And then suddenly now everybody's like, "What happened?" So it was
a blip, wasn't it? It was just a total blip.
Exactly. So it was an attempt to articulate the shifts in the finances and how that's affecting the everyday. And one of the big points in that article was about how the middle is dropping out, because Netflix, Apple, all the streamers, they are still making drama at a premium, but they are making less of it. And the ability to, because money's kind of gone out of the US, the ability to fund your mid-range drama at around 2 million. Your mid-range drama is, because there's no US distributor money guaranteed anymore, so it's really, really hard to sell your program overseas. And so those are not being made. And the BBC and all the terrestrial broadcasters are still putting in what they always put in, even before there was this big boom. So the gap is now even bigger to get your thing made, because rates kind of have gone up, and so everything's more expensive to make. So the middle's dropping out. The streamers are making big drama at premium rates, and there's a downward force on rates and on drama in general, because everybody's having to make them for less and less in order to get them made. And so that's kind of like, and that's the basic kind of like model. How that will shift over the coming years, I don't know. What we can do I've got some ideas about how it will shift, which we can talk about, but how we can respond to that was the second point of the article. Because I read that first one and everybody was like, "Well, that's fucking bleak, isn't it?" Kind of like, and it wasn't meant to be bleak, it was meant to be illustrative.
No, exactly. Yes.
And so the second article was like, how do we respond to that? What can we do? I do think we need to accept that those big heyday kind of those couple of years when everything was in a big boom post pandemic, they are gone. And there's no point kind of crossing our fingers and hoping that they're going to come back. It's the landscape has changed significantly and continues to change. I mean, unfortunately, or during that time, the streamers pushed the rates to quite a significant place. It's right because rates need to go up, and they need to go up because a lot of people were making a lot of money, and it was only right that freelancers should have a kind of a cut of that. I think the problem now with drama drama being so expensive to make because the rates are so high, the problem is that very little's getting made. So how do we kind of get drama moving again?
Yeah.
So we have to look at models where we can make drama for less. Now, what those models are, I think that's going to be the big shift over the next 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's easier if you're, back when I was 30 years ago and I had kind of like no responsibilities and kind of just a bit of rent. But it's kind of like if you're easier on your what you can afford to take it, can't it, as a freelancer. I think once you've got responsibilities, mortgage, kids, and outgoings, it's harder to move on those rates. But I think we need an honest conversation about what we can accept in order to get stuff made. And do we actually start looking at deals where you go, okay, I'll work for 70% of my rate, but as soon as it gets sold, we give you we give you 30% to make it up, and we give you 20 for taking the risk with us. Do you know what I mean? Nice. It's kind of like, so you make it. So we're looking at kind of profit share models. Now, they're really hard. As soon as you start kind of talking about them, everybody kind of goes, oh God, I can't believe. And the unions and everybody's a bit kind of like anti them, of course, because it involves people taking risk. But we are in a risk industry. And as we discussed earlier, we don't get into it just for the money. We get into it to tell stories, but obviously it's a job, it's a career. We want, absolutely. Yeah. So then you have to make a judicious call as freelancers about who you are going to trust creatively and financially, if you're going to go on this journey with them, in order that you believe that the project that they're making is going to get sold. And you need to ask pertinent questions about what happens after it gets made, because as freelancers we're used to just turning up on set, getting paid for a week, and then walking away, kind of like 3 months later we turn on TV and see our credit. I mean, that's kind of how it kind of works. But what I was encouraging people to do in that second article was understand the distribution, understand the money, understand where production companies make a profit, how they make a profit, how the channels are funding it, so that you have more understanding and leverage in your negotiation with a production company who are saying to you, look, come in and work for this lower rate, 70% of your rate, for argument's sake.
Yes.
But but this is our plan with the production. We're going to make it for this broadcaster, but we are hoping that once it is made, we'll be able to sell it to the US, and then we will give you your rate plus 20%. So, but you need to be able to understand those distribution, and it is naive to think that we can go forward in the industry as freelancers, because we're all entrepreneurs now in many ways.
Yes.
You can't just cross your fingers and hope that people are going to pay you fairly. You've got to think, okay, particularly now there's increasing amount of direct to consumer stuff that's coming over the hill, and the whole YouTube model. As that's coming at us, we need to be a lot more alert and alive to the financials of how things get made, because gone are the days when you can just kind of hope for a good rate and then hope that every year it goes up 2% and hope that you get enough work. I think it's just we're going to have to think differently as freelancers. So that's the second article was really about that. I think it's how would
you, for any listeners out there that wouldn't know where to start to learn about the financials and that kind of stuff, have you got anything that they would, any books, any people that they should follow online, or is it just about having conversations with your producers to start and your execs?
I mean, there are books, but the industry is moving so fast that as soon as I think there are people to follow. I mean, the Substack is a great place to start. And I mean, not just mine, but there's somebody
Yeah,
called
yeah.
Jen Topping. I follow some people. If people look at me, I follow some people online who are great commentators on where things are changing in the UK, but also how the US changes in the US, the Netflix Warner stuff, how all that stuff is going to impact us. I mean, look, it's not everybody's. I say this with kind of slight reluctance because it's not everybody's cup of tea, really. But and we got into it because we wanted to tell stories and kind of be on set and kind of like so it is. I'm reluctant to advocate too strongly for it. At the same time, I think it's if people want to earn a living in the industry over the next 10 years, I do think it's really important they get across a few fundamentals.
Yep.
And there's a few. If you look at who I read on Substack, Jen Topping's one. There's a couple of other really really good people who write about the business once a month, and you suddenly start to understand. Even if you understand the basics, if you understand that kind of we create a product and we're able to make that because it comes from three financing sources, and it's three financing sources because it's a rights package, and you make something and that the license to be able to show that in various territories is what distributors do, and you're selling those rights basically. Whether it's to an airline, and then you sell it for two transmissions on the BBC, and then you can sell it again to Netflix. As long as you're understanding just the very basics, you can become empowered, and it seems like a big hill to climb. But I think a knowledge of what's going on is going to be really, really crucial.
Agreed.
Particularly as YouTube, we're talking about the other changes that are coming round the corner. Nobody has yet squared the circle on how to make quality long form programming for YouTube.
Yes.
And because YouTube's just a platform, it doesn't make its own. It's not. It's just a platform.
Yes.
With no creative input into your product. It's not like another stream. It's not like a Netflix who've got commissioners. It's like literally, we all know this. Everybody is trying to look at the direct to consumer model because for a couple of reasons, but I think it is if we can work out how to fund quality programming and find an audience for it on YouTube. I think that's everybody's trying to square that circle, whether it's through membership subscription or advertising or bumper advertising or kind of like or kind of And
this week's episode was sponsored by Andrex.
Yes,
So
exactly.
when you ever need to, they give it one of those, don't you?
Exactly. Well, your actors are wearing kind of like
Apple watches and
Apple
everyone's
watches. Yes.
drinking Heineken.
I mean, it's awful, isn't it? I mean, it kind of. I mean, you don't want it to. I mean, at its very basic, that is what we're doing, isn't it? Kind of like, but. I mean, we want to create. We want to create brilliant stories, amazing series. Got into it because we were inspired often by a series. We don't want to be making advertising, but to get stuff made, we're going to have to think as producers about how to square the circle on that YouTube stuff. I think
brand product
freelancers need to be aware of the distribution from that point of view as well, kind of like so that they kind of like how it's going to work, so that they know what they can offer their services for and where they're going to earn some money and maybe earn some money in the long term from the long tail.
Yeah, I mean that the YouTube model seems to excite me because it feels like such an untapped market for, and I say this with with the love and respect for professional products. You go on YouTube, my kids are watching, some kids opening up presents and it's shot on an iPhone and they're shot reverse shot and they're over the line and the lighting's rubbish and the sound, but they don't care. It's that's not part of what their YouTube experience is. It's just about that content. But being able to find a way to be able to go direct, make something, go direct and have some sort of experience with the direct to client. I think that's, as you said in your article, YouTube now isn't just an iPad in the living room. It's on your telly. It's there. You
Yeah.
can watch the ability. There's I don't think there's ever been a time in history where there's been so much content being created at scale
Yeah.
from the homegrown people on their iPhones making adverts about the tea that they're drinking to the massive Hollywood 100-200 million pound features. But it's an interesting time, and as you said, that the ability to understand the money. We all got into this for the creative, but to understand and to be able to make your creative, you have to understand the money. And if you're a young director, if you're a young production company, if you just have if you have no concept or no understanding of the finances, your company might make one film and then that's it, then it's done, because you haven't been able to understand and maximize the profit share for you, for the crew, for your company, for the business. And that's why I just wanted to just get people to understand, look, no matter what part of the freelance process you're at, if you can have an understanding of the finance. And that's why I like the what you were talking about the kind of, I don't know if it's called back end profits or whatever, that that extra 20%. You always hear stories of people that, Michael Jordan took less money but took profit shares of Nike, and now all of a sudden he's 100, they're worth more. So you kind of, if and I guess my first question would be, if crews start taking percentages of the back end, how does that affect the company? So say like a Bend It Like Beckham, if the
Mm.
whole crew had taken a 50% um payment and a percentage profit, would film the film had done so well, how does that profit normally get shared anyway? Is it normally just going to the production company to make the next film, or can the
Yeah.
production companies lose that margin at the back end?
I mean, the production, somebody, I mean, it's a zero-sum game, isn't it?
Yeah,
With cash. So, so if it's going somewhere, then it's not going somewhere else. But, I'm a great believer that people should share in success, financial success, creative success. I just think that's the
agreed.
way to work. And you won't. Unfortunately, we do live in a time when trust for producers, production companies isn't always as robust as it should be. So, like I don't know where that comes from. I mean, there's always a kind of general skepticism that the people above you are kind of like, do you know what I mean? In the hierarchy, are kind of like doing you over, isn't it? I mean, that's
Yeah,
just
they're
nature.
drinking Nespresso pods. We've got Nescafe sachets.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. Everybody's really annoyed about the people above them in there. Yeah. But the
I think there
I
needs to
think
be
if
more people like yourself at the top, sir, that have come
well,
through
I
it, that
mean,
have seen it, that
yeah.
understand the creative and understand the finances, and are trying to make a fair situation from where we are. Because let's be honest, it's a bit of a pickle at the minute. It's not as
Yeah.
clear cut as it has been, and I think honest conversations from experienced and clearly empathetic people to the industry as a whole, but understanding of the process. I think there needs to be more people like yourselves having these honest conversations out in the open, so it's not all cloak and daggers. So thank you for
Yeah.
starting it.
Well, no, I mean, I always think people need to. I mean, I don't know if I put this in an article. I think it was there for a bit, but I come from a kind of like not a particularly kind of well connected or wealthy background, and I found there's a cultural antipathy towards talking about money. And it is what Scott Galloway talks about this, the podcaster. It's just a way of keeping less wealthy people less wealthy. Because you're not supposed to talk about money. It's a bit uncouth and it's a bit kind of like, oh, let's not kind of like, please don't ask me about where or how this financial setup's working. And
Mm.
it's just a way of people not being able to ask questions that are going to benefit them. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
It's a really important, and being candid about and people are obviously kind of like, money's a sensitive topic. But people need to feel empowered, emboldened to ask honest questions about what everybody else is getting, kind of like how people are profiting from this participation in this creative venture,
Yep.
and assess whether that's fair.
Mm.
And I learned from a very early age that you don't fuck people around on their money. That is like it's just like you can't. It's the rule one of business is that you don't mess people around with money. You kind of like you're straight. You have to be really honest with them about what you can afford and what you can do, and kind of like and that is what you give them. But you never. As soon as you start chipping away at that, as soon as you're kind of promised something that you're not given, or kind of like there's kind of we'll give you this rate, but then it falls to that when you're actually kind of signed a contract, or then it turns out that there's not as much holiday pay as you thought there was going to be. All that stuff is corrosive to trust, and we just must have honest conversations, ask difficult questions at the beginning, and find some producers who we can kind of like trust and be straight with, because it is a way of keeping not keeping people down. That sounds too extreme, but certainly keeping people who are not who haven't grown up with lots of money. It's a way of kind of like keeping it that way, and so that's why I encourage an open conversation.
Lovely. Well, look, we've got to about the hour mark of recording, and I just
Wow.
want to say thank you, because as with every single episode, it kind of just there's always a point that you're like, I could probably talk for another hour on some other topic, and your time is precious. And I want to get these last two questions that we have on the film gods out, where the last question's always, shout outs in your project, but the second to last question that has always been a question that I love hearing people's answers. And I don't your own personal story highlights how hard work, a bit of luck, but a luck that's come from being in the right place at the right time, and being able to have relationships with people that they trust you. So when you were, you know, coming up through the editing, and then and that first person gave you that the two 90-minute Channel 4 things, they saw something in you, and then you were working and you were getting everything that you could, and then someone gave you that, the story producer job.
Yeah.
It sounds that your own personal journey has come through learning, hardship, hard work in the trenches, surrounding yourself with people, understanding to check the ego, learning about trust, and going from the heights of a very high education to cleaning toilets in a post house. There must have come a point, or maybe there wasn't, but if there was a point that you ever doubted the process, and it can be at any point, it could be at that post bit, when you're at Casualty, when you were at EastEnders, if there was, and I'd love to know if there was a point for you that you're now gonna go and give this advice to, because having had the life that you've had, with the experience that you have, in the prime position to now help the industry kind of push forward, the advice that you have now to that person is probably and more than likely going to be something that someone right now needs to hear for themselves. So the second to last question, and I put it to you, if you could give us a time and a headspace that you were in to then be able to hear this advice, I'd love to now know what your advice to your younger self would be.
So I think when you start out, when I started out, I kind of you see everybody as a, I keep saying you, but I think it's
Fine,
true of
we
more
get it.
people than
Yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But no, but I do. It may not be everybody's experience, but I think I um, set out. You see it as you're right. I arrived in London and it was like, I need that job. I need that kind of like, and everybody was a. It's too easy to see everybody as a competitor for the same. It's
Mm,
some things are zero sum games, but some things are not.
yeah.
And I wish earlier on somebody had have said, relax, but also understand that you are only as strong as your network. You know, you this making films, making TV, it's a team sport.
Mm,
You are only strong. It's like my experience on Casualty with Trevelyan and Simon and the three of us doing that year when I learned so much about directing. It is, you realize that actually you can't do this on your own. And seeing everybody as a competitor as opposed to an ally is an error. And so I think it's really important that you and nourish those creative talents and see yourself as part of a creative network that you can help other people. And that's what I mean. I learned that years ago. Too late for me, but I wish I'd kind of like heard it in my early 20s and I heard it in my kind of, had it in my mid 30s, but fine, it came to me eventually.
yeah.
And so embracing your network, really cherishing them for the individuals and unique talents that everybody has, and realizing that together you can make it and make something good creatively is really important. I think as well as really key to follow, you get lots of advice to follow your passion, and actually, I think you need to follow your talents.
Mm,
The industry is so competitive. You will have a unique talent. In every situation where you're looking to kind of progress, have it you need to kind of understand what your unique offering into that is. And in a world where everybody's kind of like, trying to do similar things in an industry where people are doing similar things, what is your talent? What thing do you have that you do that you love doing that everybody else regards as work? Do you know what I mean? Like,
mm,
I talked earlier about how I loved editing so much that even after a 12-hour shift of making coffee and sandwiches and cleaning toilets, I would go in and teach myself how to cut stuff in an edit suite on an Avid.
mm.
And I did that, yes, because I wanted to learn some skills, but just like I just love kind of putting music on stuff and cutting stuff up and kind of like, I did, it's just a real joy. I hit my flow state with it. And that's the reason that I was able to then progress. Because people saw what I'd done, and they were silly little bits of video back in the day. They were like, home videos cut to music. Somebody saw something in that because I
Yeah.
love that so much,
Mm,
and so people do have people say, "Oh, I'm really passionate about being X," but I would kind of say, look at it a different way. What are you gifted at within this industry? And
mm.
kind of like, yeah, if you are if you're gifted with a set of skills, really embrace that and really nourish that and charge and use those rather than try and pursue something for, you know, but yeah, people often say, kind of, "Oh, I want to direct feature films," but it's because they love films. And that's great, but
Yeah,
kind of like the glamour of film directing is the thing that's dazzling them,
yeah.
not the need to tell a story and kind of like and it's about being honest with yourself about what your unique talents are.
Amazing. You're right. There was that, and that kind of bounces into another article I was reading about what's coming up. And AI is a totally different topic, and it's something that we can talk about. But this chap spoke and he said, with what's coming, find what problem you can solve. And I hear what you've just been saying about what is your, not so much your passion, but what is your talent. And I guess if you can align your talent with a passion and a problem solved, and you can turn that into something that you do Monday to Friday for as many hours, and someone's going to reimburse you with money, you're living the dream. It's beautiful. It's amazing. Well, look, sir, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We now get to the last question, where the floor is yours to be able to give a shout out to anyone that you want. It's a BAFTA winning award speech, or if you just want to kind of give some shout out to your production company or other people, like, the floor is yours. So anyone or anything or any project or people that you want to give a shout out to now would be amazing.
What I'd love to do is big up Esmerlda Productions. We are, we're a new production company. We're a fledgling. We're 2 years in, and we are dedicated to amplifying unique voices, unique stories, and kind of delivering them in a unique way. So if anybody kind of wants to get in touch, we're not in production yet, but I'm really always very keen to hear from people. I would encourage people to read the Substack. I think that's a really a good way of also hearing what's going on in my mind. I mean, there are several people I've mentioned here in the podcast who you don't get here, as I've said, on one's own. So all those people, that amazing year with Trev and Simon Butcher, and that amazing break that Lucy Raff gave me. It's just an incredible kind of, like, I've been blessed by incredible working with incredible people, and that's they know who they are.
Amazing. Well, ladies and gents, I told you it was going to be an amazing hour from someone so experienced but humble and genuinely passionate about creating unique stories, as they said, at Esmerlda Productions. I just firstly want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for being so candid and open, but on the honesty. I think when you first said that thing, and I learned two things, and the first thing was I checked my ego. At that point in the app, I was like, I know we're going to get some absolute gold dust, because you're not trying to be anyone other than who you are. And thank you so much. May the industry be filled with you, sir. And let's absolutely smash 2026. So thank you for your time again. And ladies and gents, until we meet again on another episode, that is a wrap. So that was a chat with the king or queen in the game. I'll give it a shout at the end so you all know the name. It's the Film Gods Podcast. The what? The Film God Podcast.